Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Not sure what happened there, but I guess my internet got patchy for a minute. But I just ran some speed tests and everything looks to be doing good. Can everybody hear me and see me okay? My apologies. We will jump right back in. I just want to make sure that we are no longer having any technical issues. I think we're good. Hmm. Looks good on my end. I think we're okay. Yeah. Again, my apologies for that. Having to cut off so short. And I know that there were questions that I didn't get to yet, so I'm sorry about that, guys. But let's go ahead and just jump on back. Welcome back for those of you who are joining again. Thank you so much for being here. And yep, and we are back. Thank you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Pineapple Power blesses your stream so you have no more issues. Thank you. I appreciate that. We are A-okay. Fantastic. Tracy, hi. Girl, I've missed you. Thank you for joining. Yay. Okay. No more tech issues. Hey, Missy, recently I have been really anxious and I have had weird thoughts like I am not doing enough or I am not doing things right. But every time I think about my manifestation, my anxiety creeps in. Yeah, this is something I certainly struggle with this. A lot of people do struggle with the feeling like we're not doing enough. That's a trap. That is a trap. This is not a doing practice. This is not about needing to do more, as in take any kind of actions in 3D. Um, and that's probably where a lot of it's stemming from. It's stemming from ego, basically. It's stemming from the conception of self that says, I need to work harder if I want something. I need to do more if I want to get it faster. Here it's the opposite. Less is more. Less is more. This is not about doing, this is about being. Who are we being in imagination? Who do we identify as in imagination, right? Not talking about the 3D. The 3D can look however the hell it wants. But in imagination, what are we experiencing, right? And the same thing goes for like doing things right. Again, that this is not about like doing a bunch of techniques to get an outcome. Yes, that's what we ultimately want is an outcome in 3D, but this is more about becoming, right? We want to actually imagine and feel into the version of us that has what we want, the state of consciousness where we already are that person, right? So, anytime you notice feelings like that, know that it's stemming from ego. Know that it's not you're not able to do more to get it. That's not how this works, right? So do your best to try to relax into whatever you may be feeling. If you're noticing that anxiousness, that tightness of your chest, take some deep, long breaths. Take slow, deep breaths from the belly. Do some meditation. Do something to help you alleviate that anxiety because it's lying to you. Okay? I promise. Why do I always feel anxious while doing SATs or manifesting my SP? It always feels like I'm trying to manifest. Is this my self concept? If so, how do I really embody my self concept to match desire? Good question. Yeah, kind of similar to the last one. Yes, that anxious feeling is always coming from ego. That's always coming from self concept. And it could be, any of the beliefs and assumptions, right? Um, the belief of not being good enough, the assumption of not being good enough, uh, fear of doing this right, if we're doing this right. Yeah, it always feels like we're trying to manifest because the way that a lot of us approach this at first is using the techniques as a means to an end, right? We're trying to manifest. And I've talked about this in several videos. Um, but as much of a paradox as it sounds, you're not trying to do anything. You are in imagination already experiencing, right? Because in imagination, we can experience anything. We are not bound by the limitations in imagination. There are no limitations in imagination. So we can be, do, have whatever we want. And that's the entire point. This is a practice of being completely fixed and attached to the outer world and instead turning within where we are limitless, right? Um, and that's how we embody a new state. We do it all through imagination, truly. So instead of the mentality of, I need to do this to get something, and I'm imagining to enjoy the experience of it. I'm imagining to enjoy the experience of it. And I do have a video coming out here in a couple hours, kind of going more into this topic specifically, how to get into a state, how to genuinely occupy a state and know that you are quote unquote doing this right. This is live, yes. Uh-oh. Am I still having connection issues? Can someone let me know if I'm having connection issues still? We can hear and see you clearly. Okay. All right, thank you guys. Yeah, I just want to make sure. Some people were saying that they were having some connection issues. Um, where was I? Let me go back. Where was it? Missy, I want to build my faith in the law by manifesting small things like a rainbow, a free cup of coffee, but even those things are not manifesting. I did visuals, affirmations, wrote it on paper, but it didn't. Looks like a part of your question got cut off. Motivational quest, but if I had to gauge, it's the smaller things are not manifesting, are not appearing, right? And why is that? So th- a common way, this is a very common way that we test the law, right? We make a list of things that we desire to see or experience and put it away and watch it unfold, right? But here's the caveat. Here's the thing. If we are looking for them, if we are looking for those items, if we are bringing into awareness that it's not here, I'm not seeing it, that's how we sabotage it. So if you're going to do the list method, if you're going to write things down to see them come to fruition, you have to drop it. You have to drop it. It could be difficult because though we don't have attachment to these small items, these insignificant items, we have attachment to the idea of manifestation itself, which can be very difficult. Um, hmm. Sorry. Half the people in here are saying the connection's fine. The other half are saying they can't see anything. My apologies. But no, if we're going to do the list method, we have to be able to drop it. Like, once you write it down, once you, take a moment to just imagine it, imagine the feeling of getting it, drop it, put it away. If that feels too difficult to do, another way to build our faith and trust in the law is through just sheer observation, not trying to manifest anything, just observe the nature of your mind and the nature of your 3D surroundings. And what you will inevitably find is that they go hand in hand. That if I imagine something, I will see it come to pass in some form or another. Connection is fine. Okay, good. Yeah, my apologies, guys. Let me see. I'm gonna roll with it for a little bit. I'm sorry if you're having connection issues. If you are, maybe try to jump out and jump back in again, see if that might help. Let me see. Do you think that journaling about present situations create more of similar situations? Absolutely, it can. Mhm. Yeah. Um, if you're journaling, if you're scripting or anything like that about present circumstances, that can absolutely leave impressions. Um, yeah. So I would be mindful if you are journaling things that perhaps are not ideal or anything like that. Um, Not that you can't do that. If you need to journal something angry and get it out of your system, that's fine. But I would go back and revise it. Yeah. Because whatever we're putting our attention on, whatever we are giving our energy and faith into, we're essentially giving it our blessing. So, how to change dominant beliefs and build your self concept? Imagination. That's the short answer is imagination. That's how we change our beliefs and assumptions. Because it's through imagination that we can experience anything. So if I have a belief that I'm unloved or I'm unlovable, I can imagine that not being the case. I can imagine people telling me that they adore me, that they appreciate me. I can feel in imagination circumstances where I am loved, right? And if that's what I continue to put my attention on, that's what's going to ultimately become a dominant belief, right? It's going to override the old assumptions. So, yeah, imagination. Always, always, always. Oh, you have a good question, Northwest Wind. In your opinion, why is it that the 3D is delayed? Do you notice any correlations to time lag? Do you notice any correlations to time lag lengths, or is it mostly random? Good question. So when it comes to the 3D and 4D imagination, what we have to remember is that imagination is not bound by linear time, whereas the 3D does appear to run by linear time, right? So the 3D happens in a series of events, right? It feels like it's on this linear trajectory. Um, so I can instantly go anywhere in my imagination. I'm not bound to that linear time and imagination, so I can experience something instantly in the mind. In 3D, it's going to need to catch up to that, right? It moves a lot slower because again, it plays by the rules of time or what appears to be time. So if we're noticing, uh, what was, do you notice any correlations to time lag lengths? Yeah. What appears to us as a time lag is usually double-mindedness. It's a double-mindedness that creates what appears to us as time lag or things why things don't happen quickly. Uh, if we truly have no resistance to an idea, if we imagine something, we fully get behind it and trust it, it will happen very fast. It will happen very fast. Usually, it is delayed because, well, we go back and forth, right? One moment we're imagining the outcome we want, the next moment we are doubting, questioning, fearful, anxious, things like that. Um, but yeah, we want to we want to always remember that the desire we have, whatever we desire, already comes with the means and plans of perfect expression. So anything that we want, not only is it a gift from God in the form of the desire, but it's already got the means and ways of expression that we don't consciously know, right? So that's why imagination and faith are the two most important aspects. Because if I imagine myself already being, already having, that is me accepting this gift. And then it already has the ways and means of playing out in 3D, right? But when we're back and forth and double-minded, it's like we're changing the trajectory every other, you know, a few times a day. So it's hard to get to the end when we're switching trajectories several times a day. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I hope that makes sense. You guys are sweet. Yeah, my apologies in advance if anyone is still experiencing buffering. Um, how can I improve my chances of having better slash successful manifestation? Please answer if you can, and thanks. Absolutely, Mohammed. How can you improve your chances of more success with the law? Um, Self-observation and essentially like strengthening your imagination. And by imagination, I mean the ability to imagine yourself as already having the experience you desire. Practicing going back there in your mind. And that's why I say all the time, like, go into this with the mentality that we're doing it for the experience. Like, we are just going there to enjoy the experience in imagination and continue to practice to go back to that, right? Observation, because through observation, we can truly start to build our faith. And faith is what is going to keep us out of double mindedness. Neville would say that the formula for manifestation is imagination plus faith, and he wasn't kidding. Meditated on the idea that imagination is my sanctuary. That was amazing. Yes. Yes. I love that because it is. Imagination is truly our sanctuary. That is our world that we have complete and total control over. In our imagination, we're not bound by the circumstances. We're not limited by anything, right? So it truly is your sanctuary. And that's why I say, go there, have the experience you desire, because nobody can say no to you in imagination, right? Right? One way I tend to explain to myself about how people get things in ways that contradict manifesting, i.e., with the worst self concept, is that it's just me seeing things that don't make sense. Might be a little bit confused by your question, JT. So you're trying to figure out how people get things in ways that contradict the law? with the worst self-concept. Um, well, other people are only gonna show up in ways that you assume. So, I wouldn't concern myself with how other people are showing up out there. I mean, you can observe it for the sake of building your trust and faith, but, um, yeah, if you're assuming that people out there are always getting what they want, despite having a terrible self-concept, well, right? What are we gonna see? So, it comes back to self, always come back to self. What are we assuming? What are we identifying as? Or who are we identifying with, right? That's what we always wanna go back to. Question, how do I change my SP to always choose me? In my head, he does, but in 3D, it's not reflecting what I envision. Then when he does things that don't choose me, I get triggered and react. Yeah. I was saying on the last stream before I had to close out, because of technical issues, it can be challenging when we're dealing with the 3D. Like, when we are dealing with the person face to face, dealing with all of the old reflections, because those are all just impressions that we once planted that are coming to harvest. But it can certainly help keep us in the feedback loop. The first thing that I want to note is we're not doing any of this to change the SP. We're changing the self always because that's what we have the power to do. We have the power to change self. Um, yeah, because and I say that because if we're going into it with the mindset of I need to do this to get the 3D to change, we're susceptible to more reaction from the 3D. Um, we change our assumption about that person. We're changing our assumption about that person. So all of our, what we think, feel, believe, and true is about that person based on the old stories, our circumstances, our memories with this person. All of these things are constructing a narrative. They're constructing assumptions that we hold about that person. That is what we are changing. And that's what we want to continue to go back to in imagination, right? Um, if it feels like it's if it feels like it's difficult to not react to 3D, perhaps even take a moment to cut everything out of the 3D and just focus on turning within. Sometimes we really just need to get acclimated first to the idea, to the new impression within before we can really begin to face it without, if that makes sense. Let me see where I was. I used to do the worst journal entries and my life stayed horrible. But I agree, release, heal the root, and revise. Yes. Yes, absolutely learn. And me too. I used to do the same. I mean, before I knew any better. Yeah, yeah. Hello, Chi-chan. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's good to see you. No need to apologize. Good to have you here. I know it's super, super early, late where you are in Japan, so I'm just always happy to have you here. Mhm. Happy Sunday. Yeah, Nangam, absolutely take care of you first. Always, always, always put yourself first, and that goes with everybody here. Don't ever subject yourself to anything that is not ideal, n either in here or out here. Yeah. Do what you need to do for you first and foremost and always. That's right, Leanne. No doing this to get something. Do it to enjoy the experience. Hello, David. Hi. Hi, hi. Missy, how did you change your self-concept? What did you actually do? What were the techniques and how much did it take to change your self-concept? Please tell. Um, so questions like this can be I always try to be very careful to, first put a disclaimer that what worked for me as far as specifics, like specific techniques and how long it took me and all those things, um, can be very different from your experience, right? Basically, what worked for me may not work exactly for you. What I don't ever wanna do is, say, "Oh, do it exactly like this many times a day, this amount," and then you go and try and replicate that through force or willpower. If we introduce force and willpower into this, instant resistance. And, like, that is why we have resistance, because 'cause we're trying to make something happen, when this is not about making something happen, right? Um But I mean, to answer your question simply, my self-concept changed when I started to change how I was in here. It was all about the change in here. It's never about how many techniques I'm doing or how much I'm doing them. It's just about finding first what ways feel most natural to you. When you imagine, when you are living in the end, when you are imagining what you desire, in what ways resonate with you? Is that through visualizing? Is that through affirmations? Is that through inner conversations or, just a combination of all of them? Get familiar first with how your mind naturally goes, and how things naturally form and how it naturally feels for you, right? Um, because it's going to depend. Uh, but if you take some time to really explore, if you take some time to go within and really see, and that's the other reason why I talk about self observation, because we can see how our mind naturally imagines. Like, are we noticing that we are very visual people? Like, do we see a lot of mental images? Are we noticing a lot of visceral things in our mind? Is it more like conversations, like just the auditory conversations? Uh, Things like that. So, with that, you can start to get a better idea of how you can approach this and how you can begin to take what you're already naturally doing, but in a way that is more desirable. I hope that makes sense. And as far as how long is going to be wildly different for everybody, right? So yeah, I wish I could give you more concrete answers like that, but what I don't want anyone here to do is try to force the techniques, try to like beat themselves over the head, burst a blood vessel, as Nova would say, doing the techniques because that is it's not ever going to help you get where you want to go. Yeah, yeah, for those who are having some issues, I do sincerely apologize. I don't see any buffering or issues on my end. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully in the replay it'll come back clearly. I do apologize for that. Um I thought I couldn't manifest the free coffee. I accepted it that it wasn't gonna happen until I got it in a crazy way and then realized it was the 3rd time I got free coffee. Yep. Yep, you see what you did there. I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. As soon as you let go of the notion of trying to get coffee, it showed up multiple times. That's that's what we're dealing with here. Yeah, Chi-Chan's the coolest. She's rad. Hi, Missy. How to stop feeling anxious/worry about lack when I'm spending money in 3D? Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I would spend more time in the day to day living in that place of abundance and imagination. Like whatever the world looks like for you, like whatever the idea of abundance looks like for you, I would be spending as much of your free time as you are able living in that place in your mind. We don't want to wait until we are like feeling anxious or reacting to use the techniques and try to manifest then. This is something that we want to be, as Neville said, morning, noon, and night, right? We want to be imagining often as we are able, as much as we can, just ruminating on the idea of wealth and what you would be like, what would your life look like, what would a day in the life look like if you never had to worry about bills again. And just let your mind go to all these places, like, let it get filled out, and I would just be going back to there as many times during the day as possible, and also because it feels good, right? It should feel really good. That's kind of the idea. If it's a desire and we get to experience that desire, like, that should feel good, but, if we're trying to like, in that moment where we're feeling lack and we're feeling anxious, it's going to be very difficult in that moment to feel abundant and wealthy, right? It's gonna feel like you're very, very far away from that state of abundance, like, when you are feeling lack. So, take advantage of the day take advantage of the times a day where you're not spending money, you're not dealing with bills, you're just relaxing on your couch, and get lost in your imagination for the pure sake of enjoyment. What is the energy drink you're always drinking? It's not an energy drink, it's peach iced tea, and it's really good. It's really, really good. Yeah, a lot of questions today about how to ignore the 3D, if we're constantly noticing or we're interacting with it in 3D, um, which, again, it can feel incredibly difficult because of our attachment to 3D. We're all very conditioned and attached to the 3D, and the idea of the 3D feeling more real. And really, the other thing that we aim to get to in this practice is a place where we fully trust and believe that it's not the 3D that's the real world. Imagination is not fantasy, right? We have it completely backwards. um, so yeah, we in that interim, if we're when we are still getting the hang of this, when we're still exercising that imagination muscle, so to speak, we don't need to like literally ignore the 3D. We can be aware that the 3D is whatever it looks like. We can say, okay, this isn't about lying to ourselves. We're not trying to lie because we can't lie to ourselves, but instead about practice redirection of your attention. Like where we are putting our attention and focus is so important. So, practicing as much as we can during the day to day, redirecting our focus and attention from the 3D circumstances and how much they suck, how terrible they are, this person's being a jackass, to instead in imagination, I am experiencing exactly what I desired. And I'm living that experience right now. And we practice coming back to that 70 times 7, as Neville would say, right? Now, if it feels like you've hit a breaking point or it feels like you're in this holding pattern where you keep reacting to 3D and it kicks you out of the wish fulfilled, then I mean perhaps take some time for you. There's nothing wrong with taking some time to take your attention away from the 3D if that's what you need to do. I had to do it. I had to do it with my person. I was continuing to be triggered and reactionary to how he was showing up in 3D. Which that trigger, that reaction was just planting more seeds that would again show up later down the line, and then I'd feel better, and then the seeds from when I reacted would show up, and it would just round and round and round we go. So, we are ultimately practicing getting to that place of detachment from the 3D and the circumstances and the old assumptions, but in the interim, we're practicing redirection of where we're putting our focus, going into imagination instead of fixing without. And if we need to, take some time where you can be away from the 3D triggers if need be. They're not going anywhere. I know it can be scary to take the focus off the SP and 3D. They're not going anywhere, right? So, yeah, it does get easier. That I can promise. Am I the only one who noticed Missy vaping sneakily? Not didn't think I was being so sneaky about it. Yeah. Those who are regular here know that I vape. It's pretty apparent. It goes to ads. They're putting ads in the live stream. That's not cool. I'll take care of that. I'm sorry, guys. How much time do you spend imagining and doing visualization? My manifestations are not happening as quickly as I'd like them to, and it really bothers me. But aren't our desires here already? Yes, yes, that's the important thing. Um, how much time do I spend well, I'm imagining all day, every day, just like everybody. I mean, if you're talking about consciously consciously imagining, like deliberately imagining, uh, all the time, morning, noon, and night, and doing visualization. So I made a video talking about my routine, sort of what I do in my day to day, like how I go about imagining. Mornings and evenings before bed are really the two windows that I really focus on as far as visualization goes, as far as like in going into stats goes. And during the day to day, yeah, because we're always kind of whenever our mind wanders, whenever we have some free time, if we're not concentrating on something, our mind always wanders to something, right? We just want to practice getting more deliberate about where our mind wanders to. So if things are not showing up as quickly as you'd like, um, that's because we are double-minded. I mean, and we're bringing into awareness constantly that I don't have it yet. That's a sneaky way that we end up delaying our manifestation. To be clear, you cannot ruin your manifestation. You cannot fail at this. We can delay it though, and it's because we are bringing two things into imagination. That's what the meaning of double-minded is. We'll go from imagining and living in the end to where is it? Why is it not here yet? Am I doing this right? All of these things that that apply that clearly we are not in that state, that desired state, right? Um, because yeah, our desires are already here in imagination. Everything already exists in imagination. And what we imagine, what we continue to imagine, and where we continue to place ourselves in imagination is what becomes expressed in 3D ultimately. How do we deal with fear when manifesting? Good question. Um, First, what exactly is it that we fear? That it's not going to work, that we're going to do something wrong, that it's going to wind up being a waste of time, things like that. Well, the way to combat that is build our faith that what we imagine does in fact become 3D experience, right? Fear is just faith inverted. We're putting our faith into things that are unwanted. We have this conviction that this thing is real or it feels more natural, even if it's not ideal. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that acronym, false evidence appearing real, right? False evidence appearing real. Yeah, if it's a hypothetical scenario, it's just imagination. Like, so if we're doing all these things in imagination, all of these hypothetical what ifs, why don't we instead make those about what we desire? So instead of what if it doesn't happen, what if it does? What would that be like? What would it be like if it did work, if it did happen? And then go there. You see what I mean? So it can be a practice. It absolutely is a practice. But the more that we continue to A, build our trust and faith in the law, and B, just allow ourselves to completely wrap ourselves in what we desire instead of what we don't, that fear will dissolve. It will disintegrate. When you are manifesting the SP, how would you make sure that you are believing it is done and living in the end, but not obsessing over them? Good question. Well, by obsession, do you mean whether or not this worked, whether or not this is happening, whether or not they're going to call you, whether or not, like, what do you mean by obsessing over them? Because we can absolutely, when living in the end, they'll come up in our mind, they'll come up in our imagination, but it should feel good. It should feel calming. It should feel relaxing. It should feel like we're not anxious about anything. If we're genuinely living from that end, we wouldn't be anxious, right? um, so one is going to feel more relaxed if you are truly in that Sabbath and truly living from that end. It shouldn't be a constant anxiousness if that's what you are referring to. But it doesn't mean that we can't ever have them cross our mind either, right? So yeah, note how you feel. That's going to tell you whether or not you're living in the end. Missy, could you give some advice when dwelling back into dwelling back into the end state once we find ourselves waiting for results in the 3D? Good question. Yeah. So if we're noticing that we're waiting, if it feels like we're waiting, as soon as we become aware of that, we want to take it as a cue. We want to take that as a gauge that says, I'm not actually living in the end, right? Because we wouldn't be waiting for something that we already have or that we already experienced. Um, so that's all. We're taking these as cues, and that goes for any kind of reaction. It's all feedback. Everything that we're noting, whether it be 3D circumstance or a reaction within us, it's all feedback, letting us know what state we've been occupying, where we are dwelling, what we are assuming, right? So if you notice yourself waiting, well, that's your cue to go back there. So take a moment to go back there. Take a moment in your imagination because you can go to the end instantly in your mind, right? You can go there right now. No delays, instantly. So we continue to go back to that, right? Yeah. Yeah. If it feels like we're waiting or we're getting anxious about 3D, that means it's been too long since we have been in the end in imagination, if that makes sense. But old story persists. Should I just observe? Don't respond to old story. Respond in head to new story, then and keep revising. It can be so draining to keep repeating old and want to get over this. Yeah, yeah. And yes, it can be just like with learning any new skill, just like with learning anything that is a new way of thinking, a new way of being, it can absolutely take practice to acclimate to it. Um, Absolutely don't respond to it. Go back to revision. Just like how yeah, respond in your mind to the new story and revise it. Yeah. We don't wanna give life and attention to the unwanted circumstances because those are just seeds that we had planted, perhaps, from when we didn't know about this or didn't have as much of an understanding. Um, and yes, I completely understand the frustration, right? This is a radical new way of thinking. This is radically different than what we're used to. We're talking 180 from everything that we've known to be true. So 70 times 7 as it says in the Bible, or until the eye is fixed as if nailed by a sword. Until the attention is fixed and we are feeling relaxed into that new state of consciousness. And it does get more natural. Just like, again, learning any new skill, the more that we practice getting familiar with it, it will become second nature. It will. It might not feel like that sometimes, but it will. Hi, Missy. I'm trying to manifest a person just by doing visualization with your video. No affirmations. Will it work? It's been solid few months and nothing is happening. What might I be doing wrong? Um, More important than the techniques themselves is how you feel. Um, so when visualizing, are you are you able to capture what that's like? Is it feeling like an experience that you're having? Is it feeling like you are in that end in imagination? If the answer is yes, then absolutely you're doing it right. Um, that said, we don't want to come out of imagination and immediately fix back on 3D and what's wrong and what's absent and why is it not here yet? I don't have it. Like, Neville Goddard said extensively all the time, denying the evidence of the senses, the physical senses. So because something is not in 3D at this moment, we don't we don't wanna fix on that. We don't wanna fix on the absence of. That is only bringing into awareness the fact that we don't have it, right? Yeah. So, you can try experimenting with affirmations. You can try playing around with different techniques to see, I mean, perhaps there's something that would resonate more with you. It's gonna be different for everybody, but ultimately, it is the feeling that counts. Feeling truly is the secret. Hi, Mr. Renee. Do you know how does the law explain some of us were born into an abusive family? Is there fate or karma playing behind the scenes? Thank you. Good question. I know that this is a question that comes up a lot, and it's certainly one that really meditated on for a long time. I struggled with this for a long time because, um, in my old story, coming from my old stage, I did grow up in a very abusive household. It was not ideal. So when learning that, I'm the operant power that's creating everything, of course, I would struggle with the notion that I would create an abusive household, especially when I was a child. But it's not Missy Renee that created that, right? So to kind of delve into this topic, we need to have an understanding of I and my father are one. Or, you can look at it sometimes as the two selves. The ego or the concept of self, the idea, the name and the story and all of our beliefs and assumptions, and then the awareness of being, the observer. That is God, right? I and my Father are one, so awareness and the ego are one. They're not separate from each other, but the Father is greater than I, which means that awareness is infinitely more powerful than the ego self, than the self concept. So consciously, we won't know, and that's also why we don't need to figure out the how, like consciously, because we're not going to know those things. Like the ego self is very limited in scope, and that's not the one creating. That's not the one that's rearranging everything. That is awareness. All like, whether conscious or not, we're selecting the states, but it's not the ego self that's manifesting a life into a abusive household or anything like that. No. But we're all here playing different aspects of awareness. We are playing roles. So the best way to look at it is like we're all playing a role of consciousness. We're one arm of consciousness, so to speak. But we are all one. And so this is truly a journey of the self-discovery and ultimately awakening that comes from that. And that might be way confusing, but essentially just know it's not the ego self that created anything that was unwanted and when you were a child and all of that. Thank you for the super chat. How to cope with a manifestation that had a deadline and failed. Wanted to be invited to an event. It has come and gone, and I wasn't. That's a good question. And it does happen sometimes that we miss the mark. And that's exactly what, Neville refers to this as missing the mark or sinning, right? To sin is not some devious action, it's to miss the mark, where we have a desire, we have an intention, and fail to realize it, in a certain way or by a certain time. This happens to literally everyone. We don't need to beat ourselves up about it, though I know it might be easier said than done. We don't need to give ourselves a hard time. I mean, None of that is going to help in any way. Certainly none of that is gonna be useful in any way. Um, we wanna take aim again. We wanna take aim again. Continue to build your trust and faith. Continue to see for yourself that it is you ultimately that is the connection between your imagination and what's happening in the 3D circumstances. So that way, perhaps, there's no more wavering, right? There's no more going between confidence and fear and doubt, and confident and fear and doubt. Yeah. Also revise. Also revise. There's many, many, many times where it looked like something initially failed for me, but because I did not accept the fact that it was a failure, because I did not give in to that notion, it ended up playing out, even though it was the 11th hour. It appeared after I failed per se. So yeah, don't accept that. Revise it and continue to look and build your faith through observation that you are in fact the operant power. Yeah, because we can always take aim again. That's the beauty of this. Even if we miss the mark, who cares? We can always take aim again because states of consciousness are eternal. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to disappear forever. That's not, none of that's true. So, yeah. You're welcome, Lucas. I also tested the law and not all things came true. Is that normal? Yeah. Yeah, it's normal. Um, that's why if we're going to test the law through something like the list method, we have to be able to set it and forget it. If we're looking for it or we're continuing to become aware that it's not here, it's not showing up, what are we observing? What are we bringing into awareness? I don't have it. It's not here. It's not working. Set it and forget it. Because it will always show up when you're not looking for it. How to deal with impatience? Good question, because I know that this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I do have a video that I recorded, it should be coming out soon, talking about this specifically. But impatience implies that we're a lot of the times it stems from us looking at the techniques and looking at this practice as like a means to an end. Like we're doing these techniques to get a certain outcome in the future. So we wait for it, right? Like I did this thing, now I'm just sitting around waiting. Instead, we want to look at this like what we are imagining is real. It's just as real as 3D. If I imagine something and I have a strong reaction to it, the same way that I would strongly react to something in 3D, well, it's the same thing, right? However I'm reacting, whether it be from something in 3D or something from imagination, it's the same feeling, which is going to produce the same result. So, if we're dealing with impatience, we want to remember to come back to imagination. Like, bring yourself back to the imaginal act as if it's happening right now. Neville would say, bring there in the future here to the present, right? So, wherever you are in space, bring it here and make then now. Bring wherever it is in time and bring it here now. And we practice doing that. Like, I am is a present tense awareness, right? It is what we are aware of in this present tense moment. That's why we always want to imagine from the present tense or as something that already happened in past tense, right? So yeah, that's just your cue to come back to imagination. Your comments keep disappearing, David. That's weird. I'm sorry. Well, I saw that comment come through, so maybe we're over that hump. What is self? 3D or imagination? Good question. So the self is okay, let me back this up. I am is that present tense awareness. That is God. Unconditioned consciousness, that is God. Like if you take a moment right now and just notice that you are aware, notice that you are conscious, right? If you're here looking at the screen or typing on your phone or computer, like you have that awareness, right? You're aware that you're doing something. That is God. That awareness is God, right? Self concept is the ideas of self. So it's the ideas of awareness. It's the um yeah, it's our beliefs, it's our assumptions, it's all the things that are constructed, that all the conditions that I am or I is subject to, conditioned to believe, right? So when we think of I, when we think of I am, that's just your awareness. And the self concept is all the things conditioned. It's all the labels that we've attached, right? Or that we are attached to. So I hope that makes sense. Da-da-da. Finding my spot. Sorry, guys. One moment. Time doesn't exist and only appears in linear fashion, yet how does cause and effect work? Neville mentioned, too, that in each resurrection, we also retain spiritual progress implying cause and effect. Yeah. I mean, if I'm understanding your question correctly, cause and effect is, well, it's the inner, it's the I, and then whatever is produced from that. We are always the cause, and the 3D circumstances are the effect. Like, not the other way around. We think that, the cause is something that happens in 3D, and we have an effect, or we're the effect, right? Like, we are being affected by it, but it's the other way around. We are always the cause, and the 3D is the effect, always. Like, that is the law in a nutshell. In each resurrection, we also retain spiritual progress and implying cause and effect. Mhm. Yeah. Well, this is absolutely a journey, and with each resurrection, we're going to keep aspects and elements from that what we have gathered through the experience that we've had, right? We're essentially leveling up is what we're doing. Yeah. But we're completely asleep to the fact that we are the operant power. Like, as humans, we are completely unaware, at least the vast majority are completely unaware that we are in fact the operant power. Um, so yeah, with there is sort of the best way to describe it is a leveling up. If I understood your question correctly, I may not have. Is it normal to have anxiety when working on a new self concept? Like the subconscious is confused, it seems. Yeah, yeah, that's normal. Um, well, there's likely going to be resistance to the idea at first. When we're introducing something new in imagination, when we're imagining and feeling into something that doesn't feel natural at first, we're not used to having we're not used to identifying with it, uh, yeah, yeah, we might notice some awkwardness, some anxiousness, even pushback or backlash. That's normal. It will go away. That I promise. Respo- So can I say I will not manifest my SP? Oh, you mean like the ladder method? Well, it's so the point of the ladder technique, the point that Neville was trying to make there was that the subconscious mind is more powerful than the conscious mind, more powerful than your words or just what you're thinking in your day to day is what you are imagining, what you are believing, especially in that window before bed. Like, that is a very powerful window, which is why we absolutely wanna make sure that we're not taking anything with us into sleep that is not ideal, to the best of our ability. Um, so it's yeah, it's more showing that what we believe and assume is gonna trump over what we say with words is a big part of it. How do we let go and surrender to the universe when you really want your desires so badly? Example, new love. How do we surrender and let go when we so badly desire to be loved and love? Um, that that's a really good question. It's not something that we can get to by forcing. Um, Trying to force ourselves to let go and surrender, like consciously and deliberately, is going to feel incredibly difficult to do. Detachment's something that happens naturally, right? Detachment is something that happens naturally. And when I say detachment, I mean from that old state of consciousness, from the old man and the old story. Um, that happens naturally as you begin to identify more and more with the new self or that new desire state of consciousness instead, right? So I mean, absolutely, it starts with a desire. Like everything that moves us to change starts with a burning desire. Then it becomes about fulfilling that desire first in imagination, like giving ourself the experience of it, like letting ourself feeling into it and enjoying it in here first and foremost. Um, that's ultimately how we detach. And you'll get to a place where you naturally desire less and less because you're now occupying the state of having, like you already have it. You are already being the version of you that has love, that has this new love. So as you go about your day to day, you're not going to be still fixed and craving and wanting something because, well, in consciousness you already have it, right? And we can't continue to desire something that we already have, right? So yeah, but it's not anywhere that we can get to by trying to force it, trying to make ourselves detached. It's a process that happens naturally as we become more and more familiar and identified with that new state, with that new version of ourself. Each person has quirks that make them unique. Peach iced tea is yours. You are correct, sir. That is my weakness. Oh, thank you, Caps Lock. Thank you. Oh my god. Hey, Missy, I've watched your SP and self-concept videos over and over. Since then, I've gotten rid of abandonment issues. I've manifested confidence and worth too. I'm not getting triggered by 3D anymore. Oh, you are so welcome, Miss Coco. That's amazing. No, that's amazing. Good. Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. That makes me so happy to hear. Do you believe in past lives? You mean as in reincarnation? Uh, well, absolutely, I don't believe in death in the way that a lot of people do. Um, like, we die and that's it, and, you know, uh, when we die, we're essentially awaking again in another state, maybe similar to where we were. It's almost like the closest way I could describe it is sort of like a video game. But we're always coming back and experiencing. The whole reason we're here is to experience, right? Um, so yeah, you have lived many lives. Yes. I've found that talking to myself throughout the day as I would be having my desires helped a ton. Like saying, I just love getting to spend the day with SP. I'm so grateful I wake up next to him. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. Mhm. Good. Absolutely. Yeah, and this is what like we're just playing around with different ways in which we can imagine that helps us to feel into it, that helps us to resonate with whatever we desire to experience, right? That's the whole idea. Yeah. And truly allow yourself to go there. Allow yourself to genuinely be in that place in imagination. I love to hear you talk. It's so calming and inspiring. Oh, thank you, Capsula. Thank you. Y'all are so sweet. Is it living in the end in our minds and imagination or living in the end in the physical? Always imagination. Here. We're living in the end in here, regardless of the 3D circumstance. 3D when we say the 3D doesn't matter, it's because it's all just following your imagination anyways. The 3D is the shadow. It's what follows our imagination, right? So when we say living in the end, it's in here. Why do the things we don't desire appear without effort? Yeah. Yeah, and I know that's one of the most frustrating things is how easily and effortlessly we manifest the things that we don't want. And I mean, because there's no resistance to it, because we already believe and assume these things that are perhaps not as desirable. Um, yeah, so we're not even trying. We're just naturally assuming, right? And thus it happens. That's why I always say, do not do not bring effort into this. Do not try to force yourself to imagine or force a feeling. This is truly effortless. We're doing this in each moment, right? Without even trying. But yeah, the things that we don't want appear without effort because we already believe them. We already assume it to be true, on some level. There's no resistance to the idea, basically. There's nothing that's creating double-mindedness. I gotta check and see. I don't know if YouTube updated something. I'll check and see what's going on with the ad situation because they shouldn't be showing up in lives. I will get that sort of gas. My apologies. Missy, I have a whole other life in my dreams, including a beautiful daughter named Grace and a husband that I don't have in the 3D. Is this in another reality? When dreaming of them, it feels very real. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yep. We have a whole other life. Mhm. That yeah, that's real. That is real. Hello, Amanda. I completely lost my spot. Are we reborn into the same family or very similar timeline again and again? I'm wondering how God slash our higher self decide where we go at what time. Thank you. Um, yeah, we're born again in similar timelines. Yes. Uh, as far as how God decides, I couldn't consciously tell you. There are ways in which I will never consciously know, and that's okay. Can I imagine something like a paycheck or an employee of the month from the company to say I am working there and is implying that I am working there? Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're trying to get a job somewhere and you want to imagine something that implies, yeah, I'd say looking at a paycheck from that company name on the header certainly would imply that you're there, right? Yeah, absolutely. Missy, how do you revise to Luke's story that you didn't get invited? Would you revise and act like you were invited and went? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so if the circumstances were that I wanted to go to a gathering or a party, um, and I wasn't invited, I would imagine that I was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going instead to the place in imagination where that was the reality that played out, right? 100%. I realize that my cause and effect question is too confusing to ask in a sentence. Time is happening all at once, and yet we see it as cause and effect, even with resurrection. You are correct, sir. Yeah, and it could be for for the conscious mind, for the limited mind, seeing time as all happening at once can it's a lot for it's a lot to wrap around for sure. It can be very confusing because again, we're very conditioned to look at this as a sequence of events, as linear time, right? Um, yeah, yeah, I know. Getting into these deeper philosophies can certainly be more challenging to do in like a sentence or two. You are so welcome. Hello, Bev. Hi. All right, I got time for maybe one or two more questions. Let me see. If we have internal image and concept that we carry of self, what do people in 3D see? Do they see the internal live or the past state live? Um, it's whatever we assume but should observe in the 3D. I'm trying to make sure I understand your question correctly. What do other people well, other people see whatever we assume they see, right? It's our assumptions about them that determine how they're showing up, how they're viewing us, how they're seeing us, and on and on. Um, yeah. Yeah. People are always saying what we are holding on to, the internal conception of self, that is what we're gonna see as being reflected all around us. Yes. Good to know about the YouTube ad things. I will find a way to get rid of that. That's just dumb. Yeah. Yeah, I'll find a way to get rid of that, guys, don't worry. My apologies. Is it normal to suddenly burst into tears when experiencing self-love for the first time? Absolutely it is. Oh my god, yes. Absolutely, yes. I bawled my eyes out. I mean, when I had my first genuine breakthrough after feeling love, like genuine, pure, unconditional love for myself for the first time, oh, it was like the dam just broke. Wide open. Yeah, that's completely normal. A lot of the times, we're not conscious of how much we harbor in the forms of, like, resentment, guilt, sadness, frustration. It can be we can be really, really hard on ourselves and really not not nice to ourselves. Um, so yeah, the first time you have a breakthrough like that, very normal. Yeah, and crying is normal on this journey. Hi, Missy. Thank you so much for answering my question last week. I have another one. How often should you do sats at most daily? Isn't it more often better to impress the subconscious mind faster? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's no set number. There's no set magic number as far as how many times to do it. But as often as we can imagine from that place of the wish fulfilled, as often as we are able to instead direct our attention to already experiencing and being in imagination, yeah, that's always going to be better. Morning, noon, and night, as Neville would say. That pure unconditional love is the key. Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that. Yeah. Hi, Missy. If we get intrusive thoughts while we are meditating on our wish fulfilled or during sets, should we stop and start again later or ignore the thought and keep going? Good question. I would if you're able to redirect and keep going, I would. Um, and yeah, intrusive thoughts can, you be rude and obnoxious sometimes, interrupt us when we're busy. But if we're able to just redirect it, then do so. If it feels like something that takes you right out of it, then that I mean, that's fine. You can always come back to it later. But first, if you are able to do so, and that's why practice with things like focused attention meditation, which is really just the practice of like keeping our attention on one thing and keep it fixed, can be really, really helpful because learning how to redirect is going to be a game changer for you. But yeah, yeah. Ugh. On that note, unfortunately, you guys, I do have to get going. My apologies for the tech issues and the ads and all that noise. Yeah, I will get all that taken care of. Rest assured. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Thank you for joining me, anyways. Much love to every single one of you. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you here next week, ad free this time. I promise. Bye, guys.